Welcome back. I'm Terri Wilson, and welcome to the Operating Discipline Podcast. This is a conversation for leaders willing to take a hard look at how their organizations actually operate, beyond the plans, beyond the strategy, and into execution. In each episode, we have candid, real world conversations with leaders about where execution holds, where it doesn't, and what they've had to change to move their business forward. Today's guest is Todd Dawson. He is the founder and managing partner at WorldBridge Partners. So, Todd, can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Sure thing, sure thing. Well, WorldBridge Partners started in 2002 when 8 MRI owners, Management Recruiter International owners, came together and decided that we could accomplish more together than we could individually. Since 2002, we've grown from the original 8 and shrunk back down to 5 and are now currently at 17 offices worldwide. And we're an executive search firm. We do perm placement as well as some temporary work out of one of our other offices, and we have offshore resources in Mumbai, India. But I purchased the franchise from the original founder back in 2002 after working for him for 16 years. So I just completed my 40th year in the business as
Wow.
an executive recruiter. So I came off of a desk back in 2004 because I realized that I couldn't produce as a recruiter and run a business at the same time. One was going to suffer. And so I gave up my high performing desk and gave it to 2 guys, and they took off with it and have since then focused my attention on building WorldBridge Partners, training WorldBridge Partner offices, and consulting with outside resources as well. So the journey's been interesting. We just celebrated our 25th year as WorldBridge this past April,
Mhm.
and interestingly, that was after having been open in this particular location since 1968. So we've got a
Wow.
long history of
Mm.
trying a lot of different things, and I bought it from the founder and decided that I was going to change some things operationally that he had done, and it's
Okay.
worked out pretty well for us.
Wow, thank you for that. That's very, very impressive. And I hear so many things in there that we could get into. In our conversation before this podcast, one of the things that really caught my attention is when we were talking about growing the business. You laid out how you grew the business. But you reframed that for me, and that there was a venture that you took on, and it wasn't about growing, it was about bringing more value to your clients. And I said, "Oh, I wanna hear that." That particular journey has an interesting path. So that's what I'd like for us to talk about.
Yeah, that's for sure. You
Yeah, so
know, there's 2 sides of executive search,
uh,
okay? There's one that's on the permanent side where, you're putting in full-time employees into an employer. And then
uh,
there's that temporary side, okay? And the temporary side is where I call them the mercenaries, the hired contractors come in. They might be IT people, they might be, market presidents in a temporary kind of a basis, but it's a whole different kind of business. And
yeah,
so when I acquired the business back in 2002, we just putzed along 2 more years as working in the permanent area. But I wanted to create more value, 2-sided value. I wanted to create more value for our clients and wanted
mhm,
to create more value for our own business at WorldBridge here in Omaha. And both failed terribly. And it
ooh,
was just horrible. And the reason I wanted to do it internally, selfishly, was because I knew, when you buy a business, the first day you buy a business, you should figure out how you're going to get out.
absolutely. That's
Okay,
yeah,
and so I knew what the value would be for a perm business, but I
mhm,
also knew what the value accelerant would be if I got into the temporary business, the contract staffing side. And
mhm.
so I made 2 attempts at it. I mean, as if I was a glutton for punishment. I decided that, the first time I must have done something wrong, so I tried it a second time and failed even worse the second time, which was really sad. But I decided that my clients were asking us after recessions and during recessions that they wanted temporary help.
Okay.
Well, the problem is that temporary is, you better have a stock of candidates that you can roll right into the position very, very
Yes.
quickly. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't even have a contract,
Oh,
okay, to send. And
mhm,
so you talk about trying to fly an airplane, while you're building it was
yes.
was a terrible idea. And
Mhm,
so but I thought, okay, well, I can do this, right? I mean, we've been successful here for a long time. I had 20 years of experience, and I was gonna, no problem, I can do this, right? Well, I hired a person for the highest salary ever paid before. It was back in 2004, and this professional had a real track record of building contract staffing offices. And I paid this person $120,000.
Wow.
Okay.
Mhm.
My typical salary and draw situation around here was, $36 to $48,000 25 years ago.
Well, you had
Okay.
a lot of confidence in what that person can bring.
So I was convinced, and during the interview process, I said, look, you're going to have to build this. Okay. It's not just, we're not going to come in. There's nothing in place, right? We're going to have to build infrastructure behind you.
Mhm.
And, he tried, but what I found out later that I didn't realize was that he really wasn't the guy. He was the puppet master. In other words, he was directing contract staffing recruiting professionals, and he really wasn't doing it himself.
Oh
So
my goodness.
he inherited a business, if you will, a unit, if you will, that did that sort of thing. And what I thought he was going to come in and do is, build up a database, work in the IT arena, fill contract staffing positions, get some cash flow going. I was prepared to take a loss in the first year, but what turned out, he put one contractor to work in a year.
Oh my gosh.
And after 14 months, I had a conversation with him. I said, this just really isn't what this wasn't what I forecast. This wasn't what my vision was. And he understood, and it's probably all my fault. It wasn't his fault. First off, I let it go too long before I realized it was going to fail. Secondly, I probably didn't interview accurately. I mean, I'm used to interviewing for perm recruiter professionals, not contract staffing professionals, okay? And so I really dropped the ball. So that was on me. Well, as it turns out, they were both on me, because a year later, I interviewed a person that had run a team, and she convinced me that she could build it.
Okay.
So she comes on board, and in about a month, she says, well, I need my recruiter. And I go, what do you mean you need your recruiter? Well, I go out and find the business. He goes out and, fills up the funnel, fills up the candidates. I'm going. So all of a sudden, my problem went from not just one person, but now I have a two-person team, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, we started gaining a little bit of traction, and I thought, okay, we're off, right? We're off the ground. We haven't gone to 30,000 feet yet, but we're off the ground. We're going to be fine. Next thing I know, she comes to me and she says, well, we need more horsepower in the recruiters. More horsepower ultimately turned out in a year to be 7 more recruiters that I
Wow.
paid for.
Wow.
And instead of not just IT recruiting, we were in engineer temporary staffing recruiting.
Mhm. Mhm.
And some of them were hitting okay, not great. Some were not hitting at all. And finally, after 14 months of that, and $480,000 later, I decided to pull the plug. And so I wound up terminating all those 7 recruiters.
Mhm.
And the chief comes in and she says, well, would you keep me on as a recruiter? And I says, that's what you were supposed to do 14 months ago.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And so, I failed miserably at it. And what, I don't know if it was greedy or not, but our clients were asking us, hey, do you do this? And I wanted to be able to serve them.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
$600,000 loss, 2 failed efforts. And my Chicago partner, who I helped train, who's, about 30 plus years in the business, he says, TD, why don't you just do what you do well? Okay, which is the
Okay.
perm business. You're really good at that. Why don't you continue to do that? And it was like, duh, of course. Stay in your lane, right?
Yeah.
Stay in your lane. And so we got back to that, and business just took off, and I was able to help build the WorldBridge brand across. And at that time, we were 8 offices, and
Mhm.
and since then we've gone down a few offices and up a few offices to the point now that we're at 17 offices, and one of those offices does contract staffing.
Really?
So it's not on my P&L anymore. It's on their own P&L, but that's what they do, and they do it very, very well. And in their second year, they drove, $1 million worth of business. with
Mm,
just 2 people, which was fantastic for them.
yeah.
But the difference is that I know how to manage people, but I don't actually understand the business very well, right? And
Mhm.
I was signing a lot of checks, uh, and we were failing miserably. And by any standard, I should have been out of business. But fortunately, I had reserves and was able to withstand that. But it left a mark.
I'm sure.
It left a financial mark. So I went a couple of years recovering from that. But
Yeah.
it worked out in the end because I learned my lesson not to get away from what we do best,
Yeah,
right?
and you again, that's I didn't realize it was 2.
Oh
I
yeah.
thought it was just 1, and I'm thinking that's pretty amazing. Now knowing that it's 2, what made you go after it the 2nd time?
I thought I had not interviewed well, and I thought
Okay,
I'd hired the wrong person.
okay.
And I got fooled the second time, but we're like 30, 45 days in, and she tells me I need my recruiter. It's like, what do you need? What do you mean? You haven't done anything yet, and you want me to take on more,
Huh,
liability, another employee. Uh, some, and I don't know if this was her plan, but I asked her. I spoke about that specifically. You have to build it before we're going to add people. Well, I was already committed the second time, so I thought, okay, maybe I did something wrong. Bring in a recruiter, right? So she drives business, he drives the candidate side, and it'll all work out. Well, we had all kind of operational problems because the CRM that we were using was different than what they were using. They had to learn they had to learn us. They had, I mean, culture was okay. They didn't disrupt the culture at all.
yeah.
But the business is just a different kind of business.
Mhm.
Perm, on the legal side, you might have a hiring process that goes 6 or 8 months. In the financial services, you might have a hiring process that goes 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. In the contract, it's like you better have somebody in 24 to 48 hours or you lose out, right?
Yes,
And I
yeah.
wasn't used to that kind of speed, and didn't understand that what they had to do is they really had to build from ground up because they had non-competes from their previous firm, right?
Mhm,
We
yeah,
weren't going to violate that out of professional respect. And so they had to go out and fish for different, but there was plenty of business out there. Problem is that we were growing faster than the revenue was keeping up. And so
okay.
as we were growing, I was going the other direction financially. And it
Mm,
got to the point where I almost exhausted most of my reserves, and I just said, we can't do this anymore. I'm not going to go in the hole and borrow money. I have no idea what the end is, right?
mhm,
So I went back to my roots. Okay, I was a very high level performer. In my last year back in 2001, 2000, I billed $800,000 with an average fee of $13,000. So you figure out what that is. I know
yeah,
that business. Okay,
yes.
I don't know
Mhm.
the contract business, and it came back to bite me twice. And so there was not going to be a third time. So what did we do? If our clients need a contract staffing person now, I just farm them out to our contract staffing office out in Sacramento.
Ah, it's interesting. Um, I guess really a big question I have is it was tied to the failure was tied to or the challenges were tied to an individual. Maybe I didn't you said it, maybe I didn't interview right. Maybe I didn't find the right person. Looking back now, was it around the right person or the infrastructure? And like you said, you didn't understand the business. That probably didn't enter your mind at the time, how complex that business is, how different it was from your current business. What would you do differently now?
I wouldn't even do it. What I would do is if I had to do it over again. Now, I was trying to please my clients, and I was trying to increase the value of our business, thinking of my exit strategy. Okay, so I'm a very determined individual. Okay, I mean, you will people to success sometimes, right? And I
Yeah.
thought I could will that division into a
Okay.
successful environment. What I would do differently now is I would just farm that out. I would go and explore a contract staffing office that does that type of thing, try to enter into a treaty and in a relationship, a partnership, if you will, and then farm that part out under the guise of WorldBridge Partners. But I
Mhm.
didn't do that. I was thinking I can make this work, right? I mean, stubborn me almost broke me.
Yeah.
you know?
Todd, that's a really great point because you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. And um, I think it's really interesting because I see that in so many leaders that I work with. They lean on their own strength to get things done, and you can do a lot like that, but then sometimes you don't. You can't. And so, the wrong hire we know can cost you hugely. But even if you have the right hire and you don't have the infrastructure in place to support it, it has to be a match on both sides. And so the other piece, when you talk about bringing value, whether you're doing the service or not, if you have a valued partner that you work with and you can still provide that service to your client through that partner, you're still bringing value,
No doubt.
you
You're
know?
100% right. You're
And
100% right.
well, I think, part of what I am learning now being, a solopreneur is I can't be and don't want to be everything to everyone, right? That's why I loved, when you said stay in your lane, it's like, all right, this is my lane, but I need to have partners that I work with. So as I work with my clients, I can continue to be of value to them because I have these other resources.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's the value of WorldBridge Partners.
Uh-huh.
We have multiple offices. We work in 25 different disciplines.
Uh-huh.
And I should have recognized this very early on, and I didn't. But in my defense, I was a new owner. Okay. I had been a solo performer in a large office. We had 17 recruiters, but I was a solo performer, and it was chosen to buy the business. I accepted after 16 years on a desk, and I was handed the keys, never having run a business before. And
Okay.
so I had no business acumen training. I mean, I didn't have an MBA. I don't have an MBA. I thought, okay, I know recruiting. Okay, I've got that. And you're exactly right. We didn't have the infrastructure. I just felt like I could power us through, and I couldn't. I couldn't. The smart play would have been, as you suggested, identify other partners. Well, interestingly, as we came together for WorldBridge Partners, we could accomplish more together than we ever could by ourselves.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
why didn't I rely on another office that was doing contract and let them do it? Okay. But selfishly, I was thinking about my business. I wanted to serve my clients, yes, but selfishly, I wanted my business to grow in value too, so I could, get this nice 7-digit, 8-digit buyout and, go rest on a beach somewhere for the rest of my life. Well,
Sure. Sure.
it didn't work out that way. So it was a valuable lesson. And now I consult with, as a matter of fact, I just consulted with an owner in Seattle recently. Great individual. Love the guy. He's running a great business. And what he was telling me was he was creating what I was creating.
Okay.
All right. And he's had some success doing it, but he had some contracts in place to fulfill before he ever put the horsepower behind it. Okay.
Ah, okay.
And
Yeah.
so, we've been guiding him along, but the thing that I left him with was, you have to hold your people to a particular standard, but you need to stay in your lane. So if you have 2 lanes, then you need to find somebody that can run both of those lanes for you while you play, puppet master.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot in what you said. I want to go back to what I think happens a lot in organizations is we promote people because they were good at what they did into a position
yeah,
that requires some of what they were good at, but a whole different skill set.
yeah,
And so the person comes into a new position, they were successful in their last position, they fully expect to be successful in this one, and you expect them to be successful as well. I've just seen it so often that, okay, and when the issue shows itself, we're like, what happened? And it's like, it's a different job. And I love how honest you are about that.
yeah,
I love that. And from our first conversation to this, I hear that level of honesty, which is, my words is like, why did I do that? Okay, this is what I learned in hindsight. This is how we really learn. So there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with that. It's just please learn and don't do it again. Don't do it a
You're
third
right,
right.
right. Well, it was an expensive proposition, but if anybody knows me at all, they know that I don't have an ounce of quit in me, and I'm prepared to sacrifice a lot to see other people succeed.
Uh-huh.
And we weathered it. We
Yeah.
weathered it, you know? I mean, uh, I don't know how many search firms there have been open since 1968, and the second generation owners, you know, the degree of success drops dramatically when you go from second generation. And what I learned is that we changed how we operated here. So I created a succession plan.
Okay.
Okay. And so
Mm.
now I have two junior partners, if you will, that have been under my care for 5 years. And they're learning the business. They're learning how to run a business. They're learning how to manage people. And it's it's a different kind of transition. You know, I came in, I had never even seen the books. I just trusted the guy that I worked for. Okay. I mean, I really did. I mean, he gave me an opportunity that changed my life.
Uh-huh.
And so I decided that I was going to be the missing link. So
Uh-huh.
the third generation, I don't know if you know this or not, but from the first generation to third generation, the degree of chances for success drop dramatically. It's
Sure.
like 20, 22%, something like that. Well, guess what? We're going to change that here because the third generation here is going to work, and we haven't had any downturn yet. It's early yet. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm also hearing, again, you said this in the early part in the call, is you when you buy a business, you should also be planning to sell the business,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so, I mean, and with that mindset is huge because it's not about you. It's about how do I build this business in such a way that it continues to bring value to my clients, but when I'm ready to sell it or I get a really amazing offer, it's of tremendous value. Right? And
That's
it is
right.
is it a fair statement, Todd? This has been hard. This has been hard-earned lessons.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know what though? It's the hard that makes it great.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, this is why I wanted to have this podcast. I want honest conversation because if we just continue to tell each other polished stories, okay, that's nice, but what did you learn and what were the struggles? Because I'm struggling here. So, how can we be more real with each other and tap into the knowledge that people have from honestly not just the successes but from the failures.
Well, yeah, that's where you learn the most, right? You learn
Absolutely.
by where you fail, you know?
Yeah. So when I spoke with you, I was just so impressed with that because you were right out front with that. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even have to dig, right? You were just out there. And I love that. And now that I'm learning even more about it, there's so many lessons for people to take away from every step that you've mentioned and even where you are now. So when you think about, if you're in front of, and I know you are, in front of CEOs at various, stages of their business, what would you recommend to them? What wise words of wisdom do you have?
Well, the first thing I would ask them is, tell me about the mistakes that you've made and what you learned from them.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that'd be the first thing I'd ask them. Secondly, I'd ask them what their vision is and how
Uh-huh.
they plan to get there, and how far out of their lane are they getting. Okay, I don't think you can come into a business and revolutionize it overnight in the hope that it works out. Okay, I think the example I gave you was Disney. Okay, Disney, you know, Walt made his fortune in his company on children and family entertainment, right? From his parks to his
Yes.
cartoons to his movies, blah blah blah, right? And he was gone, and they had a number of successors, and their stock went to almost $180 a share.
Uh,
Okay, COVID came, knocked that down to, you know, in the mid 70s, and now it's hovering back in the low 100 teens. Right? It's never even come close to what it was before. And why? I believe it's because they decided they were going to buy, you know, ABC and ESPN, and you know they got out of their lane. And I think that's why their stock is just hung where it is right now. It's because they got away from what made them great. Okay, and I know they want to spread their influence all around the world, blah blah blah, but you know, their duty is to create value for their shareholders. They got
mhm.
out of their lane. Simple as that. And so I just think if I was going to talk to if I was talking to a banking president, right, and they're making their living on commercial and industrial loans, and now all of a sudden they want to get into private mortgages and that sort of thing. Well, do they understand what the risk is? It's a different kind of business, right?
Mhm.
It's a much different, much more volume, blah blah blah. And so, I just, how are you planning on getting there? And have you figured out what happens if you fail? What are you going to do? And why? What's the big need? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why do you feel that you have to do this? And if you fail, do you have reserves enough to recover to save the business?
Do you
That's where I was lucky. I had planned lots of reserves to be able to withstand that kind of blowback. And
Mhm.
I never had to borrow a dime. I
So
never had to borrow any money to stay in business.
so
And
let you just said a lot. I'm gonna hit on a couple things. So, uh, you said you didn't have formal business training, so forth and so on.
right,
What you just said, hey, I had planned, I had reserves. So I knew that there was risk. I knew that I wasn't gonna be making money for X period of time. Do you think enough businesses think about that?
no, no.
Okay.
No, they don't. They don't. Here's what the thing is: when you go buy a house, right, and you're shopping for a house, right, and you guys, this is my budget, right, and then you start seeing bigger houses, nicer houses, and all of a sudden you're going, how can I make my budget work into that,
Yes.
right? And so you finally make the jump, and you move into the new house, and you're okay for a couple of months, and all of a sudden you realize that the mortgage payment is
Yes.
blowing the rest of your budget to smithereens, right?
Yes.
There's all that hidden cost that you didn't see coming, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what happens. I think they anticipate that. Now, if you're an insurance company and you got actuaries, that's off the table, okay? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about regular business, okay?
Yeah.
People want to. Here's a perfect example. Another good example. A lot of recruiting firms will start, and the MRI was a franchise, one of the largest search firms in the world. Okay, we had 1,200 offices and 5,000 recruiters. Okay, and they were constantly selling franchises, and they'd bring these brand new owners in, and they had to learn how to run a recruiting business, had to learn how to recruit, right?
Mhm.
And then they wanted to try to start hiring, and I don't know how many of those new franchise owners went out of business because they tried to grow too fast hiring people when they didn't even know how to recruit themselves,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, you're paying a giant franchise fee. You're paying tons of overhead for, just keeping the lights on, and then now you incorporate a ton of payroll behind that.
Yeah.
And if the revenue doesn't follow, you're done.
Yeah.
And so the answer to the question is no. I don't think that people anticipate it that well. Okay, I mean, if you're a billionaire, trillionaire, like Musk and all these other guys, I mean, dropping $100 million is no big deal, right?
They still have the threshold. It might be high,
Yeah,
ours, they still have the threshold. So
right.
let me ask you this also. One of the key things that I focus on is as a company chooses to grow, wants to grow, or they're just growing because, variety of things, they're going to start to see things that worked at this level. Now you're here, it's going to start to break because you haven't really scaled your systems,
Correct.
right? And so part of this is, hey, you can do this now before you grow, you can do this as you grow, but if you're really growing fast, you don't have time to go back and do this.
That's correct. It's a costly error. You have to
Uh-huh.
have the infrastructure built. For example, right here in my office right now, I've got just in here I have 10 recruiters. Okay, I have the ability to add another half a dozen. I have the space to do it. I have the desks to do it. I have the CRM to do it. I have all the infrastructure necessary for the success of people. The challenge now is finding people that want to and can do what we do,
Uh-huh.
which is a struggle for all of our employers right now.
Sure.
Identifying qualified, interested, motivated candidates to solve their problems. So you have to have the infrastructure built. You can't. Remember what I mentioned? You can't try to fly the plane while you're putting the engines on.
Yeah.
Okay, the engine's got to be in place in the hangar before you ever hit the runway. So
And Todd, I remember this from our first conversation too. this operating discipline that, I'm calling it, I remember you saying that you're a very disciplined person, very consistent. And so do you think that it's easier for someone who is committed to doing that, and that's how I run my business, it's easier for them to put that in place versus people who aren't as skilled in that?
Well, first off, you have to have the mindset that, our attitude around here is you have to act like Cortez. You burn the ships because there's no other way out.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I mean, what did Cortez tell his guys? He says, burn the ships. We're not going back, boys. Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to make the best of it. Right. And I think if you come in, first you have to have a plan. Okay. To continue success. Operationally, what I bought was in place. I didn't
Okay.
have to rebuild infrastructure for that, right?
Mhm.
But what I tried to do was build infrastructure outside of what we had, and my infrastructure didn't work with them.
Okay.
It didn't work for them, and so I think that I think you can do it, but nowadays you have the ability to prepare so much more quickly than we ever did back in 25 years ago or
Yes.
30 years ago, right? And before you do something, I think I didn't talk to enough people about what I was going to do. I was just going to do it because I
Yeah.
knew what was going to happen. Well, no, I didn't. It's like driving on a snowy road as a 17-year-old thinking that 60 miles an hour is fine
Mhm.
until you spin out and go off the side of the mountain. Well, guess what? Todd spun off and went outside the mountain. All right. I should have, taken some lessons from people around me and saying, no, this is not a good move for you.
Yeah.
You're not, and if you're going to do it, you got to build it before you start hiring people and adding all that additional expense. But I didn't do that.
Why don't you think people, CEOs ask more questions, do more research?
Why do they?
Why don't they?
Oh, why don't they?
Mhm.
Uh, ego,
Hmm. Okay.
ego. They think they know.
Mhm.
I'll tell you something. I had a search many, many years ago with a gentleman in Pennsylvania, and and I was referred to him by a person that knew me really well, and I was a very experienced recruiter at the time. And he described for me what he wanted to hire. He wanted to hire one person to do two different jobs with two different levels of expertise. Okay. They
Yes.
weren't even remotely connected. And I
Mhm.
told him that that person does not exist in our world. That
Yeah.
person does not, I mean, I know, okay, that person does not exist in our world. And he said, well, maybe I have the wrong recruiter. I said, there is no recruiter on the planet that can find you what you just described because that person doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
But he was determined that he was going to find that person. It's just like, I'm sorry, pal, but you're not. They're two. It's like the alpha and the omega, right? One's the beginning, one's the end. I mean, black is not white, white is not black. You just don't make them there, all right? There is no gray. He was absolutely sure he wanted white and black.
Yeah.
Well, you pick one.
Yeah.
And he was determined, and it was ego, and he was going to show this recruiter, and I just walked away. It's just like, I don't need I don't need the aggravation. But that's the attitude that a lot of these high level, senior executive level executives have. And I've been in a lot of boardrooms.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about what you said is I have been in that situation where a client wants these, separate things into one person. Like, you're looking for a unicorn, doesn't exist. And I mean, it's a major conversation to have, right? And I said, eventually, if you find someone that's willing to do both of those, if they can, at some point, only one is going to be done
That's
because
right.
they're two separate. The other thing I think is an important point to make is, do CEOs get enough honest feedback?
Depends. I mean, ask Warren Buffett. I think he used to get some pretty good feedback. Okay. I think sometimes there are support people that just they're yes people, or they're in front of a board of directors, and the board of directors don't have any more expertise in it than the director or the president of the company, right? A CEO, whatever. And so there's a lot of yes people out there.
Huh?
Um, I think what needs to happen is the CEO needs to ask questions and then consider what all the options are and what the probable outcomes are going to be,
Mhm.
right? And what
Yes.
is it going to take to go there? I mean, being a CEO of Ford or General Motors, I mean, that's a tough decision. I mean, how'd you like to be a CEO of one of those major automakers in the United States, deciding that they're going to stop with combustible engines and want to use electric engines like Volvo did,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yes.
really, you're going to invest, you know, you're going to divert away from what you do best. Now they've figured it out. They're going to do both, but how many electric cars do you see out there versus the other?
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it's a tough decision to make, right? And so I think some of them are they're forced into that a little bit. But you know, who didn't take any money during COVID? Ford
Yeah.
didn't take any money, right? They
Yeah.
did it their way,
Mhm.
and that's leadership right
Mhm.
there to me. But it's tough being a CEO, and it's tough to set your ego aside. And here's the problem: is that how many guys have left Disney and come and gone, gone in and out from Disney in the last 15 years? You know,
Um,
they've had some changes, right?
yeah.
Making tough decisions, and if you make the wrong decision, and when you're an organization's that big, it's billions of dollars that it costs you.
Yeah. I think there's again, the reason I asked the question, I already know what the answer is, which is yes, CEOs need better feedback, but there's also a culture that goes with that because you hire people, you say you want this in people, and then when they come to do it, they're not really welcomed into that. And so now they're being trained by the culture of what's acceptable and what's not. And so for a CEO, if you really want honest opinions, you've got to do more than just say it. You've got to show it.
Yeah, look
And
in the
when
mirror.
it comes, you have to receive it,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
shut it down. And so I think, when you said ego, there's a lot of ego and honestly in many people who are successful. That's a good thing because that helped you get there, but it's not a good thing from the standpoint of you didn't get there by yourself.
right.
You got there with a lot of other people.
That's right.
So I know you and I could talk a lot because there's just so much in what you said. I think, the fact that you took a leap twice and you learned twice, I think is amazing. And now you have these partners that you can still provide value to your clients through these partnerships. You've given, some tips. I just want to give you one more opportunity. What else would you like to say to the CEO audience about staying in your lane?
Well, you know what? There's an easy axiom that we live by in my home. Okay, I get paid well to do what I do well, so I can pay other people to do well what they do well.
Excellent. Mhm.
Okay, and it's one thing to embark upon creating something new internally, and it's another thing to partner with someone else outside the organization. Okay, and what that allows you to do is when you partner with someone else outside of your lane,
Uh-huh.
you hopefully have another persons you can rely on or talk to that's at your level, another CEO or president of a company.
Uh-huh.
And between the two of you, and maybe possibly more, all of a sudden now you've got some people that are in the same kind of decision making process mentally that you are, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
But you have to, I think you have to be open. Now, look, we're not a mega billion dollar operation, okay? Depending on the year, we're, 15 to 20 million dollars, okay? I mean, we're not a billion dollar organization. We're not a Fortune, 10 company or anything like that. But the principles still apply. And the principle is
Yes.
do what you do well and partner with somebody else that does what they do well so that you can keep your clients happy and keep your own company solvent, because now it's not about you at all. It's about the people that you serve. It's servant leadership.
Mhm.
And I think that gets lost, and that people make decisions a lot of times not understanding that the CEO is responsible for all the employees and all their families and all that sort of thing, and they got to take that responsibly. And if they take a venture that puts all that at risk and it fails, that's on you. And I take that very personally. I think it's really important for us to take care of our employees and their families and enjoy watching them grow and all that sort of thing. And it gets personal. And if it's not personal to you, then y- you've lost your humanity. I'll leave you with that.
That's a lot to leave with, and I could go and talk about that, but I don't wanna do that because I know we're limited, but you have given us so much to think about and to, kinda noodle on, and honestly, go back and look at our own, plans and our own organizations. So, I really wanna say thank you so much for being so honest, so straightforward, and, I've learned a lot, and I hope I've challenged you a little bit,
Sure.
but it's all about, again, I love what you said at the end, you care about people, and it shows. It shows. So I just want to say thank you and for being on the podcast. Thank you for your wisdom. And we're going to wrap it up now. So performance is never accidental. You can hear that in Todd's voice and what he said. It's built into how the business operates. I'm Terry Wilson, and this is Operating Discipline.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome.